Hey everybody, welcome back to the Law News Network. This is Jesse Weber. Thanks for joining us. I want to talk about the two main cases that we are covering here on this network, Michigan v. Jeffrey Willis and Lewis Toledo. Here to help me talk about these big cases that we are covering, because there's so many new developments, so many moving parts, it's hard to keep track of everything. So who helps us keep track of everything? Our very own Cathy Russon. Cathy, so good to see you, and thanks for coming on to talk about these two big cases.
Good to see you too, Jesse.
Cathy, let's talk about Jeffrey Willis. This case, he's on trial for the murder of Rebecca Blech. He's had quite the colorful history. He's now implicated in two other cases. This is the first one that's up. Let's start with this case about Rebecca Blech. What is the evidence against him so far? And we've just seen opening statements. It's the beginning of witness testimony, but maybe just help our viewers. What's the evidence against him so far?
Well, she was shot 3 times in the head while she was jogging, and the bullet casings recovered at the scene, and I'm assuming the bullets as well, are going to match a .22 gun that he had that was found in his van. So there's a connection with the gun. Also, when they conducted a search warrant of his home and they searched his computer, they found a file on his computer with her name that was titled her name. As well as his other victim, by the way, that we talk about in this case. Now we don't know what was involved inside of that file, but this guy was into some pretty sexual deviant stuff that they found out, and actually the defense brought that up a little bit in their opening statement, or during jury selection. And during jury selection, they really hit home to jurors like, you may not like our client's sexual preferences. You may not like some of the things he was doing. They went a little bit that route to be like, ignore that he is kind of a gross guy. But we're only talking about the murder of Rebecca Blech, which is, by the way, their defense opening was very short, and that was it. Like, only focus on this victim is what the defense honed in on.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that the other crimes that he's implicated in and how it might relate to this case or how it might be used. But I do want to talk about the evidence that's found. We're talking about he had a file labeled VICS, VIX, maybe for short, maybe possibly for victims, and a subfolder labeled with Blech's initials and the date of her death. The subfolder contained photos of her, wanted posters linked to her case, a photograph of a woman that resembled Blech lying on a bed. Investigators also found videos of necrophilia, thousands of kidnap and kill videos. Some were staged, but others were real. The defense tried to get this out. They said this was an illegal search and seizure. You can't bring this into evidence. That didn't work. This is really going to hurt their case. Am I right, Cathy? I mean, this is not looking good.
If you have a dead person and you have a guy with a file on his computer labeled victims and her name, or initials at least, and all of her information, like he'd been compiling everything on this girl, that's a problem. And then we're going to combine that with many other things in this case. That's a problem. With evidence that was found inside his van, with the connection to the gun. Quite frankly, I don't know why they didn't play this case out.
Yeah, I mean, in his van, I know that there was some talk about he had evidence. There was I think, things that you would use to kidnap and sexually assault someone. I know that he had. I mean, it's really disturbing to talk about, but a way to knock her out, syringes. I think he had a ball gag, things like this. It's pretty disturbing stuff. But what is the defense saying? The defense is saying he didn't do it. His cousin did it. We're talking about the guy, Kevin Blum, who implicated Mr. Willis in another crime. Can you talk a little bit about this defense strategy about pointing the finger at someone else?
Okay, so I have to say that this surprised many people, that the defense came out with this in the opening. It was not expected, actually, that they were going to go like this. And another part of their opening surprised as well. So we'll play those openings later for the audience so they can see the defense opening. And it's very short, but he starts out with talking about her husband and Rebecca Blech's husband, and how they got in a fight the day before because he wanted to take their 11-year-old daughter up to a cabin that they had to mow the lawn, and she didn't think they needed to go clear up there because they were expecting company. And her daughter usually jogs with her on Sunday mornings. So the defense kind of let it just sit out there that why would the husband take the daughter away when she was supposed to be jogging with her that morning, and they'd gotten in a fight. Then he says, the husband knew Jeffrey Willis's cousin Kevin Bloom through some club. It was very vague. He didn't get into details, but he's trying to lay this thought in jurors' heads that the husband might be behind this, and that Kevin Bloom, and then he came right out and said, Kevin Bloom is the trigger man. Kevin Bloom killed her. He's the one. He knew her. They had kids that played soccer together. He'd been Facebook stalking her. We haven't seen any of this evidence yet. This is from his opening. And that he is the one that did this, and that some of his items were in Jeffrey Willis's van. That's what he said. So that he's just removing his client completely from it, saying he's completely innocent. And he made a point to say, remember, we're only talking about this case. That's how he said it.
You know, to add to what you said, they mentioned the fact, and this is again putting it in the ideas jurors' minds, that Rebecca had a life insurance policy totaling $200,000. Why would they mention that? They'd mention that because they're trying to show that, look, this husband who is implicated with Bloom might have had something to do with her murder. I mean, they're really laying the foundation, but don't they have to do that in this kind of case where you have this kind of defendant? Do you have to point the finger at someone else?
Well, what else is the defense going to do?
Yeah.
This is the type of thing that makes trial watchers the craziest. Is either one, blame the victim and victim shaming, and that they hate that, and then two, let's just pull some innocent guy, in this case the husband, the grieving husband, and let's implicate him in this. He must have wanted his wife dead for some reason. Now, are they going to be able to come in and show that? Maybe just life insurance? I mean, and they had an argument, but they really threw some bombshells out there in opening statements that they've got to now bring into trial. Although, Jesse, let me ask you about that, because we have seen attorneys bring information into opening statements that never came to fruition throughout the entire trial. So why is that? What are the rules with opening statements?
See, it was my understanding that there's no surprise attacks by either side. You have to, if you have a witness, you have evidence, you have to let the other side know, because the last thing that you want to judge is to see that surprise attack. That's a big no-no. How this happened, I'm not entirely sure.
Well, the state may have known where they were going, and the rest of us didn't. I'm just saying, they have to be able to prove now what they said in opening statements, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're not just going to throw that out there and say, oh, we can't back it up, because as you know, as even the attorneys say in many opening statements and closing, what we say in our openings, what we say in our closings isn't evidence. It's not evidence. We lay a framework for what the case is about, our view of the case, how we think you should rule on it, but that's not evidence, what we say. So if they can't back it up, it's not going to work for them. And it feels very familiar to other cases, and I'm thinking Aaron Hernandez, where if you have a shooter and you can point to someone else as the possible shooter, it puts that in their mind. And again, that's the same thing that we're going to see here. And again, we're going to. This case has just started. There's so much to talk about it. But I do want to switch over to Louis Toledo and talk about what happened, because there was talk about bombshells, Cathy. That video that we are going to show to our viewers it is a bombshell where he admits to killing Yesenia Suarez by karate chopping her in the throat. What do you think about that?
Well, yes. Now, we knew from pre-trial hearings, and we knew that this was out there. We knew that he had at one point confessed to doing this, but then we actually saw it yesterday. And it's difficult sometimes. He's crying, he's yelling in the police interrogation room, where he finally breaks down, apparently, and tells what happened. But the interesting part of that is if you believe the state's case, which looks pretty probable, he's lying throughout this breaking down and telling bits of truth. And that's why this interrogation video is fascinating, because he talks about how he killed her, and they were in a fight, and he karate chopped her in the neck, and he's crying. And then he says, my neighbor, Tyshawn Jackson, killed the kids. He killed the kids with an axe. Why would Tyshawn Jackson do that? What possible motive would he have to kill an 8- and 9-year-old children that live next door to him when he has nothing in his past to indicate he would do anything like that?
It doesn't make sense to me. And Cathy, the jurors were the first time that they saw or heard that Mr. Toledo was implicating himself. They didn't know about this before until they saw this video, or maybe they had a preview of it in the opening, but they saw this, and it doesn't make sense to me either. We saw Mr. Jackson on the stand. He was tearing up when they talk about the kids. There's no evidence, from what I understand, tying him to this murder. So the idea that he would axe these children in such a brutal fashion and dispose of their bodies, because he was on probation and didn't want to get in trouble, so what would he do? By committing a horrific double murder. Yeah, that makes sense. Capital murder. And let's not forget, they asked Mr. Toledo, you're a tough guy. You karate chopped your wife in the throat. You know martial arts. You didn't attack this guy that just killed these 2 children? No.
Right.
Kind of pushed him.
He said he pushed him up against the wall, and he wanted to. He wanted to really go at him, you know. But you have to remember, this interrogation video, he's crying, he's kind of hysterical, and so he doesn't finish all his thoughts necessarily. So we don't have a clear indication of like, okay, then what happened? Okay, then what happened? Because he's sort of like all over the place. But see, Tyshawn Jackson did help him. Now, whether if we believe Jackson unwittingly helped him dispose of the property, he got a knock on his door from Toledo early in the morning and said, I need you to help me and follow me. I'm going to drive my wife's car. I need you to follow me in my car. And he did it. And then they get to a parking lot, and he watches Toledo wipe down the wife's car.
Yeah.
And then on the way back home, they're in the same car together. Toledo's now driving his car, and then Jackson's in the passenger seat, and Toledo says, I just snapped. So according to Jackson, all of a sudden he's involved in something that he didn't know he was getting involved in. I found him believable. We've had some analysis come on and saying that, hey, this is good for the defense, showing this guy looks like he's very involved. But for me, he just sounded very believable. He didn't go right home and call police, though, and that's the problem. He was scared. Mm-hmm. So it took him a little bit. But anyway, so we were going to play those videos for people that missed it yesterday. We're going to play them throughout the day today, because Toledo is off today. They're not back until Monday. They just had a regular scheduled day off due to a scheduling conflict. And when you watch those interrogation videos, you just think, man, we spent one day watching like day 1 of police interrogating him. And I don't know where they are. I slept in my car. I was at a cemetery. I had to cool off. I woke up at 8 in the morning. I went in the house. She wasn't there. I don't know where she is. She's obviously just left with the kids because we're getting divorced. She was having an affair, So that was a whole day of him deny. And then we get to these videos where they've just broken him down.
I mean, look, he's denying it because killing those children is equal to a death penalty eligible case, and that's the problem for him. The strange part is, Cathy, like, I'm looking at this, and you don't see this in every case, but him admitting to the killing of one of these victims, doesn't that equate to killing of all 3?
Well, it has to. I mean, come on. Are they really going to believe that some other guy comes in and the way he says it, with an axe, chops up kids with an axe? I mean, first of all, it's so disgusting. It's so disgusting. Second of all, it's unbelievable. And so I don't think the jury's going to buy that at all. Now, interesting, yesterday morning before court started, the judge called Tyshawn Jackson at home because the defense is calling him back in their case in chief. And he said, I'm going to be out of town working. So we heard a conversation the judge had, said, look, do you need me to call your boss? You're going to have to come back. So we know that the defense is now calling him back in their case.
Well, that'll be very interesting to watch. Very interesting to watch. My next question was, Cathy, you follow these trials all the time. What on earth will the defense need to do to turn this in their favor? Because all that we really heard, or the main point that they wanted to put forward in their direct was, I want you to hear, to the jurors, I want you to hear all the evidence. You don't make your decision until you hear all the evidence, until you see it in its entirety. They haven't put on their case yet. It's really looking bad for their client. So what on earth do they need to do? If they have to grill Tyshawn Jackson, what else do they need to do, in your opinion?
Well, I had known about him confessing to the karate chop and to killing his wife. So I assumed that was going to come out in the defense opening. Like, we did this, but we didn't do the kids, just trying to save his life, keep him off of death row. They didn't mention it at all. And it turns out that they were still trying until the last hour to suppress that video of him confessing. And they lost on that. But so now what are they going to say? Maybe they'll say he was under duress. He'd been interrogated for a long time. He was already in custody. You know how these false confessions come along. And they, I mean, that's the only spin I can see they can take on this.
Yeah. Wow. This is fascinating, Cathy. It's really two disturbing cases. We're talking about Toledo. We're talking about Willis. Willis is coming back today, I believe, at 1:30, if I'm correct. But it's just really horrific in both situations. But yeah, we have two defendants that are really having very colorful histories here, and these trials are very interesting and very captivating for people to watch. So, Cathy, thank you so much for joining us to talk about both of these cases. We can't wait to come back and talk more about it when we have more details, specifically when the defense puts on their case and when we hear more in Willis, because that's sure going to have some surprises. So, Cathy Russon, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.